Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, having a great weekend and all that, and following the 3H's of the channel and all that good stuff. And in this video, I have a set of stories that are extremely bizarre. And I know I say that a lot, but these really are pretty weird. And they're also pretty scary too, but that's expected. If this sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. Back around September of 2022, I was playing in my backyard with my Doberman Rottweiler mix named Charlie. I was throwing this tennis ball around the backyard as it's his favorite game. He's got enough energy in him that we can do this up to 9 or 10 hours easily. Accidentally, I tossed his tennis ball a little farther back into the woods behind the house. Charlie goes barreling into the trees. He runs through a small pond right behind too. About a minute later, Charlie comes back. He's scared. His tail is between his legs. He's sitting behind me and whimpering and growling. I decide to venture out myself as Charlie probably ran into an aggressive animal. While searching the backwoods behind my property, I'm kind of impressed at how far I must have thrown this ball. I venture a bit farther to where I can't even see the house anymore. I search the woods for a good 45 minutes before my nose gets violently assaulted with an awful stink. Like, picture the body odor of somebody who hasn't showered in 2 months, and then amplify that by 5, and add like dirty socks in there too. It just wasn't a very good smell. And then I see out the corner of my eye a figure about as tall as me, and I'm around 6'2". I'm audibly gagging at how foul the smell of this thing is. I see it's starting to back up a bit. I notice that it looks like a giant man in a ghillie suit, but it's actually unkempt, dirty hair upon looking a bit further all over this thing's body. I can make out the face a bit. It looks like a caveman, but there's something kind of primatey about it too. We stare at each other. After about 10 to 12 seconds of eye contact, the thing bolts off into the trees, and it was fast. It disappeared in like a matter of seconds. I turn around and run back to the house. I never did find that tennis ball, and I can't help but wondering, did whatever that was take the tennis ball for some reason? Back in 2007, I was in a scout troop, and this particular time we were taking a swim in some lake deep in the woods. On the other side, we see a young lady dressed in a white bathrobe looking type thing. She waves at us. We wave back. All of us saw her. She takes it off. We can't help but notice that she's naked. She dives into the water. We sit there for 3 minutes, waiting for her to come back up. We sit there for another 5 minutes, waiting for her to come back up. 30 minutes pass in total, and she still hasn't come up out of the water yet. We walk to the other side of the lake to try and find her. We pick up the robe. It smells like rotten milk and dead fish. All of us are WTFing, super confused. Inevitably, we still have to go back to camp. Without any explanation, nobody can explain what we saw and why she didn't come back up. But the night comes. We're about 100 yards from the lake. At some time after midnight, the counselor wakes me up. He says that we need to move further inland. He's very shaken up. I ask him what happened. He said the same girl we saw earlier walked straight into the tent of 3 boys and started choking one, trying to kill him. When the other two started hitting her, she ran back to the lake and dived in. We decided that it'd be best to just call the cops and leave in the middle of the night. On our way back, the boy who got choked said that her hands were as cold as ice and that she smelt like dead fish. We still have no idea who or what the hell she was. It still gives me chills just recalling the whole event. In July of 2016, I had turned 18 years old. I was visiting my grandparents in rural Liguri in Italy every weekend to work. At the time, my grandfather had prostate cancer, so he couldn't work by himself. He asked me if I can go into the forest and cut this fallen tree. I think, yeah, sure, whatever you want. I enter the forest and I walk for a whole kilometer. As I venture downhill into the forest, the trees become bigger and they start to look rotten. They're covered in moss and stuff like that. I continue to walk and I realize that all the sounds have gone. I can't hear anything. No birds, no cicadas, nothing. I start to feel uneasy and inexplicably tired. Eventually, I did arrive at the fallen tree that my grandfather had marked. I struggled to start the chainsaw. It felt 10 times heavier than it should have been. I frig around with it for at least 5 minutes, and then I managed to start it. I start to cut the tree into 6 or 7 pieces, and suddenly I feel even more exhausted. I'm covered in sweat, even though it was super easy to cut the tree. I stop and sit down. I'm thinking that I probably have low blood pressure or something. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like a pair of feet, rushing and fast. I looked around me wildly to see if there was a boar or a deer. There's nothing, but I could still hear branches and leaves crackling and breaking along with the movement. And then a strong smell of decomposition or like rotten flesh attacked my nose. Now I'm legitimately terrified. I began to walk away very fast uphill back toward home. I could hear the footsteps following me. The smell was also following me, bombarding my nose the whole way. There's still nothing to be seen, nothing to identify, and no source. I think, oh God, it's chasing me. So I start running as fast as I can, chainsaw in hand and my axe in the other. I can see the light of the sun outside the forest. I'm struggling to breathe at this point, but I make it through. As soon as I got outside the forest, the sound came back. The smell practically vanished. I looked around me. A shadow moves in the forest. I faint. I can't catch my breath. I woke up in my grandparents' home. They told me they found me unconscious near the forest with bruises all over my body. As I told them what happened, they didn't really reply, and they didn't explain to me what it could be, but they gave a knowing look to each other. This happened way back when I was 18 years old. I was with my friends and my boyfriend, just screwing around and being dumbasses. We were trying to figure out something to do. My boyfriend at the time suggests that we go with him to check on his dad's farm. It's an hour drive, but it is something to do. So me and my friend agreed to accompany him. After all, his dad has a dog that I really like, and the dog likes me. I'm excited the whole car ride to see this dog. We get to the farm, and the mood changes from happy and uplifting to uneasy. My boyfriend is kinda looking around weird. The garage light is on, and the dog is barking, and we're also out in the middle of nowhere. The farm is surrounded by trees. There's no lights, but our flashlights, and the house light. I follow the other two and get out of the car to greet the dog. The dog stopped barking, but it's still very uneasy, like when a dog is looking around and has its ears pinned down. I ignored this, like a dumbass. However, the dog stayed very close to me and to my boyfriend as we were going to go check the chickens. I think the reason at the time for me not really paying attention to the signals that the dog was giving us was because sometimes dogs just bark. Sometimes it's nothing. So the dog starts whining the closer we get to the chickens. My boyfriend says some look dead or injured. He gets incredibly mad and starts yelling and enters the pen. I stay out there with the dog. My other friend follows my boyfriend, so I'm out there alone. I hear this weird noise coming from the trees. It sounds like somebody speaking, but kind of in a whisper, but loud at the same time. I think, oh great. My boyfriend comes back out before I fully react and says that coyotes must have got them. They found a hole in the fence. He wants to check the trees for feathers. I don't know why he wanted to check the trees for, or why it mattered. But I tell him I heard something. And he said, like, oh, you're just not used to being out here and stuff. And didn't really take it seriously or pay attention. So we're walking toward the tree line, and the dog starts to growl. The dog grabs at my sundress and tries to pull me away. I think the dog is trying to play, and this isn't the time. But I laughed, and I pat its face. Again, I ignored the dog's signals. My friend and my boyfriend enter the woods. I don't follow, I'm afraid. After a few minutes, I hear yelling from far off, and then a really weird scream, and then a gunshot. Both boys come running out of the woods and tell me to run. I start running as fast as I can. I thought that it was some animal or a hillbilly or something. Later on, after we got back in the house, they went outside and checked all the doors and windows to make sure they were locked. When they came back in, they told me what they saw. They said it looked like a deer, but it was standing on its hind legs, and it had big antlers. And upon seeing them, it screamed and started running toward them. My boyfriend shot at it. He narrowly missed. This made the thing scream again, which must have been what I heard. And then the other thing that was really weird is that he said that it looked like the buck that he had skinned a few weeks ago, and that the pelt and a lot of the meat had gone missing. The moral of the story, I think, is always listen to your dog. I live in a small town that has a lot of woods. When I was 14 years old, I was out with my friends, and we had just watched The Hangover 2 at the mall's movie theater. After the movie was over, it was dark outside, and we had neglected to somehow find a way home. We asked one guy if he could just call his mom like we usually do, and he said that he had actually been grounded, and he had snuck out of the house to see the movie with us, so that was kind of out of the question. But he said that there was a shortcut through the forest, and I go with this plan, but I'm a bit iffy with it. I'm not a fan of walking in the woods at night, especially through a shortcut that I'm not super familiar with. I've only been down it in the daytime. So we're standing out in the forest, and when we all hear a snapping noise, I say that I'm not going in there, and then I'll take my chances walking home the long way. Even though I say this, at some point I must have succumbed to peer pressure because I ended up going in the forest with them. And it's pitch black in the forest. For some reason, our lights just weren't doing all that good of a job. What it kind of felt like was when you'd have like an old digital camera and you'd shine a flashlight, but on the camera it would come up as being a small beam. It's that kind of feeling. That's the only way I can describe it. And some of us walk faster than the others, so I was pretty far up ahead. I was over halfway home, and suddenly, from behind me, I hear screaming and running. Out of the darkness, my friends come running, so inevitably, I run too. Even if they were pulling a prank, I still didn't want to take my chances. After we all got out of the woods, I realized that walking the trail wasn't that bad, and I thought they were pulling a prank on me to try and scare me, so I tried to call them out on it. But then I realized that they're still afraid, and there's only 3 of us now. There were 4. I say, "Where the hell is Brandon?" Everyone looks like a ghost, like pale, scared, sweating. They're stuttering all over the place. It says there was somebody in the trees that got Brandon. Brandon disappeared. I don't know where. We just ran. By this point, it's well past midnight. We have school the next day, and we still don't know where Brandon is. We stay up all night, not sure what to do. Do we call the cops? Do we tell his parents? We go to school. This is, again, just a few hours after we left the woods. Somebody in our friend group had told people that something happened to Brandon, so there's gossip everywhere now. It's at this point that the rest of us feel terrible for not calling the police. We were just so scared. But then, Brandon comes in, late, around 1 p.m., but he comes into school. He looks absolutely shit-faced. Everybody watches him in the distance, kind of limp and stumble. He sits at our table. He doesn't say a whole lot. He just eats an apple. I get a close look at him. He's covered in bruises and cuts. It seems that what happened last night sucked the life out of him. It took a few minutes, but then he just simply asked us why we left him alone in the woods. From his point of view, everybody was walking. I was way up ahead. Everybody starts running, saying that there's something in the trees. And then he feels something touch his back, and everything goes black. He woke up, still on the forest trail, feeling like he hadn't slept in a week and eaten in longer. He said he felt awful, like he was totally hung over or something. And he just figured he would come to school. He didn't know where else to go, especially since he wasn't really sure what happened. After a few days, he returned to normal, and he was perfectly fine. He still doesn't really like talking about the things he doesn't remember. I was hiking in this mountainous area. It's not exactly super high altitude or lots of steep cliffs around, but I just felt like exploring for a bit. I didn't take any guns since I wasn't planning to shoot, and I wouldn't be licensed to hunt there anyways. So I got my backpack and my tent, my food, and my water. I got decently far from civilization. I see a deer. It's a massive buck. I didn't think there would be any up here. It doesn't seem to have a herd, but I figured that they're just outside my line of sight or something. I watch it for a bit. It's super peaceful, just to watch it do deer stuff, I guess. It leaves, and by this point the sun is beginning to go down. I find a spot to set up my tent. I should have done this earlier, but I lost track of time while watching the buck. I set up camp, gather some dry wood, and I move a big rock. While collecting some dry wood, I notice I set up close by to a fairy circle of mushrooms. They were just big whitecaps, I think. I was too paranoid to go near it. There was nothing in it, just grass. So I finished setting up, and I pulled out my jerky. I didn't feel like cooking during this. I felt pretty sluggish too. And then that oh so great feeling of utter silence kinda waves over the entire area. I'm looking around. I'm mildly freaking out, but not super worried. This kind of happens in the forest sometimes. I never believed in those skinwalker stories, but I wished I had a gun with me, as all the tales were going through my head, and I was beginning to become very paranoid. I strained my senses, looking into the bush, wondering if maybe it's just a snake or a dingo. I decided that I would rather prefer a cryptid over a cassowary. But then I smelled something, and I felt goosebumps before I realized that this doesn't smell anything like copper or blood or decomposition. It smells like Turkish delight or roses, some combination of the two. I turn around and someone is standing there, watching me with their pet dog. They look kind of like a young adult. He just smiles and waves. He asks me what brings me out here. I'm a little on edge, but he's super polite. The dog is a husky and is absolutely massive. The young man is kind of small, which makes the dog look bigger. He's kind of feminine looking too. He doesn't enter my campsite, which is kind of calming despite the big dog. The dog isn't being aggressive either, more curious, which also helps. He converses with me for a bit, asking general, non-probing questions. Why I'm out here, if I like camping, small talk stuff. He asks then if he can have a seat. I think nothing of it, and I say sure. He steps into my campsite and seats himself across from me. The dog lies down next to him and puts his head on his lap. I finally notice that he was standing in the fairy circle from before. I wonder if I should point this out as he pulls out a metal flask and drinks from it. He offers me a drink and asks me why I'd camp so far away from your fellow man alone. I accept the drink, but I don't drink just yet. I tell him that sometimes I like to be alone. I like to think. I'm about to mention the fairy circle when he asks me if I want him to leave. I tell him he's fine, and I take a sip. I cough. It's unmixed absinthe. I hand it back to him. He smiles at me with his eyes closed before taking a long sip himself. This guy is so relaxed and friendly, but everything is still so quiet. I mention the fairy circle, and I ask why he was standing in it. He stops smiling and looks me in the eye. He says that that's just the direction he came from, and he corrects me, calling it a fae circle. I ask him where he came from, and if there's a road or a town back there that I didn't know about that's not on my map. He dodges the questions a lot. He says that he doesn't live around here, that he's not from around here. I can't get a normal answer out of him. I start to get a little on edge as he dodges my questions. The bush is still very quiet. After some time of this, I'm getting tired. I ask him where he's camping. He smiles. His eyes get unnaturally wide, and he tells me not to worry about it. At this point, I am super spooked with the fire reflecting off his eyes. He looks not even human. He starts breathing kind of heavy and stands up. I realize just how short and skinny he is. He takes a sip, stows his flask, and politely says that he should leave. He won't say why, but he waits until I say goodbye before he leaves. He walks right through the fairy circle without stepping on a single mushroom. He stops in the center and turns back to me. He puts something in his mouth and lights it. He tells me to have a good night and politely asks me to not litter on his property. He also tells me to relax and informs me that he doesn't bite guys. He leaves with no flashlight. The rest of the trip was very normal. I never saw him again. I also didn't step in that circle or leave any trash or litter. Better safe than sorry, right? So, what'd you think of those encounters? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you want to. In the description as well is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel by donating, but just watching the video helps too, no pressure. And if you've sent a story in and it hasn't been in a video yet, then it will be, don't worry. And with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're new to the channel, or just haven't seen the videos, then I'm going to put a couple videos up here on the screen that you can watch if you want to. Just something to hold you over until Wednesday. Anyways, thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.